Yeah.
Okay, so I'll edit this bit out in a moment. Let's get started.
Okay.
Okay, just make sure we've got everything on where it's supposed to be. Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back again, episode 22 of the Birth Lounge. I have got an amazing guest today. Once again, I get the opportunity to meet this guest for the first time, just as you are as well. This is someone I spotted on Instagram doing some amazing things, and the conversations we've had up until now have been a bit more focused towards pregnancy, labor and birth. Yet, of course, as we know, the rubber really hits the road on the other side when baby comes home. And maybe it's not the first one, but the second, third, or fourth, and all different challenges arise from that. So I am clueless in this area and wanting to learn more. Jen Muir, we'd love to introduce to this amazing conversation. Welcome.
Thank you, Andrew. It's really good to be here, and I'm excited to meet you face to face and get talking about parenting.
It's awesome. Thank you for saying yes. Complete stranger sends you a message. And I did that because I know you've just got so much wisdom to share. And I guess for listeners in, maybe love to get a bit of an insight into you, Jen. You know, what took you to the journey you're on. We'll learn a bit more about that in a moment. But 4 boys, am I right?
4 boys, 5 if you include my husband. And
in that household.
It's a busy house and a big, giant Groodle, female Groodle, who's new to the family, who was a bit of a COVID panic buy. So it's busy.
Wow, that's amazing. So Jen, maybe I'd love to share a little bit about, I guess, the journey to what you do, and then maybe you can share a little bit more about that specifically. That'd be great.
Yeah. Okay. So in a brief nutshell, I am a social worker. And I've worked in a variety of different places within the hospital space, the mental health space. I've worked in the legal space and in domestic violence. And I had my 4 children over the last 11 years. I have 4 boys aged between 4 and 11. And each time I had a baby, I got more and more passionate about the area of parenting, about families, about connection with kids, about creating a secure attachment. And I just kept feeling this real passion and desire to work in that space, to impact families, to work with mums. And I was lucky enough to wind up working at the Mater Hospital in Sydney about 3 years ago after I'd had my 4th son. And I get to work in the space as an obstetric social worker now. I work with women before the birth of any baby, whether it's the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th. I do a lot of parent education. So that's education around the first baby or the second baby. And I'm also a parent educator privately. So I teach Circle of Security and Tuning into Kids, which are different parenting courses. And basically, I am passionate about this area of parenting because anyone who's a parent knows it is just the toughest job. And like you say, we spend so much time preparing for the birth of our first baby, and maybe not enough preparing for the big impact that will happen for us within ourselves and as the parent that we need to be. And so that's why I do what I do, and I absolutely love doing it.
Oh, that's amazing. And I think you mentioned before too, you're now working at the same place where you had your two boys, right?
So I had my first 2 babies at the Mater Hospital in Sydney and only had my next 2 in different places because we moved to Brisbane, not because of the hospital. Right. And so it was kind of a very serendipitous thing to wind up back at this place that I had become a mum, helping people that are becoming a mum, and it feels very meant to be, if that makes sense. Wow. So yeah, it's really kind of quite special. But yeah, funny to be back there in that same place where it all happened for me as well.
Oh, very cool. So yeah. Jen, I guess what I'd love to know, and I'm just going to throw questions your way. I hope that's okay.
Okay.
I love when I get to meet people who are just living what they know they were meant to be doing. You know, I think that's what I get a sense of you from this conversation.
100%.
Perhaps take us back maybe to first birth and maybe what all the things that you faced, the challenges, all those things, and leading us to number 4, that I guess you discovered this passion and this need to go and help others see what you know.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to do that. So basically, my first birth, I was a super prepared person. I'm a reader, I'm a studier, I'm a social worker, I'm a daughter of a therapist. So I went and studied calm birth before my first baby, and I was really prepared, really excited. And we got a baby that I would say kind of was one of those went with the flow babies. So he ate and he slept and he hit all these milestones really beautifully. And so I thought I was a pretty amazing mum, if I could be honest with you. And look, I also was someone that would put my hand up and got help. I had lactation help. I wasn't afraid to put my hand up if I needed help with routine or with kind of working out what he needed. And that's probably just the way I approached parenting. I was kind of like, I'm happy to pull in an expert where needed. And so I just kept learning. But again, I have to say I was maybe a little bit smug. Like I thought, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing. I'm really good at this. Look at my kid. And people would be like, oh, I have trouble. My child won't sleep through the night. And I think, well, if you just did a few things. Anyway, along came my second baby, my beautiful Liam. And, he had severe reflux. He cried 24 hours a day, virtually, or that's how it felt. And suddenly I was faced with a situation where, despite me knowing what to do, this baby wasn't doing it. He was harder to feed, he was harder to settle. He was a hard baby. And on top of this, and what I hadn't been prepared for, my little eldest baby was suddenly a 2 or 2.5 year old, and he was pushing boundaries and needing this connection with me. And suddenly I was like, oh my God, this is really hard. And so I would say that was the hardest bit of my parenting. We took 3 years before we had our third, because for me, that was a big break because I really did want 4. But we sort of took a bit of a break, and I found that year particularly between number 1 and number 2, sort of growing those 2 up and sort of muddling through. Suddenly you're further away from the job you had, from career. You're in the depths of mothering. I think it can be really lonely for mums. I mean, we know it's lonely for mums. There's pressure to get it really right, and you're kind of stuck with 2 little babies all day long. So I found that bit quite hard. But then eventually sort of had my third, really hit my stride, and that's probably where the passion came from. And I started to think more and more about, as soon as I'm back at work, I want to be working with mums and families, and I want to make a difference in this space. And then, yeah, had my fourth little Harry. And yeah, look, they're all unique kids. They've got their struggles and their challenges, like all kids do. And I've learned different things from each of them along the way. But yeah, that's basically it. Did I answer the question?
Oh, you did immensely. That was amazing. Wow. So I guess from that, I love and maybe love to dig a little deeper, and maybe if we resonate, obviously, with maybe mothers listening into this who are in that moment now where the struggles are very real.
Yeah.
I guess to really help them understand, what was your thought processes then, and how did you grow through that? Was that from things you were reading? What were you doing to help yourself in that moment?
Okay, that's a really good question.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I did, well, I hit the wall, and I went to a family child health clinic in Crow's Nest, and I was there with my little 9-month-old, who, because of the reflux, was also a really, really fussy eater. So we were having eating problems, and I went there, and I think I burst into tears about his eating, and I was like, I can't make this child eat, blah blah blah. And the worker there suggested I do a course called Circle of Security Parenting. And I was thinking, circle of what? And I came here because my kid won't eat. I don't need a parenting course. So that was a really interesting moment for me, because also I'm a social worker, I'm a daughter of a therapist. I know what I'm doing here, right? So I kind of was a bit offended. Anyway, I don't know why, but I went home and I thought about it, and I just decided to go, mostly because I'm really curious. I was reading a lot of parenting books. I was into Steve Biddulph, and a bunch of other parenting educators, and I was pulling in ideas, and I would try to do things with things like when you have to start setting boundaries with 2-year-olds, but it was really hard knowing, do I listen to that stuff in the book, or do I listen to what my mum thinks, or how do we do this? Anyway, I went and did the course, and it's an 8-week course that basically the purpose of Circle of Security is to bring the knowledge of how we create a secure attachment between a primary caregiver, aka mum and dad, and a child to parents over 8 weeks. And the reason it has to happen over 8 weeks is that it creates a bit of a shift in our thinking. So the things we think about, basically with our children, we see their behavior with our mind, not our eyes. So every time they do something, we're seeing it through this lens of the way we were treated as a child and kind of a whole bunch of other thinking, right? So I went and did this course. Around 3 weeks in, I was like, just saw everything differently. And I'm not saying it changed my parenting overnight, but it just gave me this new lens of which to view it. And then I was implementing all of that knowledge over the next year, and it just changed my parenting. It made me, I feel like it made me be able to just enjoy my kids a lot more, and not like, once you realize it's not your job to say fix sadness, but just to be there with your kids, which is a lot of what I teach, the pressure comes off, and we're able to just be there with our kids, not feeling like it's got to be perfect all the time. And so that changed the game for me, and I just kept thinking and thinking about Circle of Security and how to bring that to parents. And so what I do is I try to bring that to parents, but I try to do it in some ways. The world's moving a lot faster these days. Not everybody can get to an 8-week course. And so I try to bring this to people, and that's what I do through the Instagram and through the courses that I do. I'm trying to bring it faster and quicker so that parents can get the access to that feeling now, basically.
Yeah, wow. That's actually so insightful, right? Yeah, our own judgments that, I guess, cloud the view.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe if I can, and I guess there's two elements here. What I'd love to know is, on that, there's maybe mothers listening in right now that are really struggling, really, like, as I think the words you used were, hit the wall. Like, I can only imagine that's a real reality for a lot of people. I guess maybe what's your advice for them, and also their partners, because I guess I can only imagine in your situation as well, your partner's still, sometimes, I guess, we feel a little helpless, so to speak. What's your advice to both parties, I guess, in a way? What would you suggest?
Okay, for first of all, I'll speak to mums. I would say, first of all, know that you are doing the best you can, and you've never done this before, and it is hard. And so I really want us to go easier on ourselves. I think as a generation of parents, and I speak about me, but people coming through that are younger than me now, we're trying to apply the same perfection that we'd apply to our jobs or our lives before kids to kids, and it's not doable. What the evidence says is that our kids don't need perfect parents, and we don't have to feed them organic and have them sleeping really well and have it all look really good. We actually can just be present, and that is enough. And so if I could say, first of all, just be nice to yourself and tap out and take breaks. But what did I want to say? I've lost my second point.
Okay.
But I will jump to dads, because I kind of think dads are so important, and they are in it up to here now. Like, it's changed even in the last decade, and it's changed since COVID. And I think for both, I would say for both mums and dads, get help. Ask for help. We were not made to do this alone. And I think that the village has changed. So when you think back to sort of when my mum raised me and my brothers and sisters in the 70s, she got 2 weeks in hospital. She came home to a village where all the women did not work, and they all gathered around, and that woman learnt to breastfeed and learnt to parent in this village where everybody kind of muddled in together. Now, women, including me, I went home to an apartment on my own. I bathed that baby on my own. And couples now are very much on their own doing this, thinking, are we the only ones struggling? And I think we need to pull that village in. So if you've got it with family and friends, that's amazing. But if you don't, putting your hand up and saying, I need help with feeding my child, or with, with just learning how to be a parent, because none of this is innate and we're learning as we go. So I think be really gentle with yourself and ask for help.
That's amazing advice. That, I love that, we hear the quote, it takes a village to raise a child, right?
Mm.
Where did things shift? And I'm not saying it's all wrong. I always do my best to be optimistic in I guess, it's a different world that we now live in. Let me put it to you this way, Jen. You had a magic wand and you could fix the situation. What would you do? Where is the, I guess the real key of change?
Look, absolutely, the village is a big part of it. If I, I can tell you how I felt as a young mum, and I touched on it before, but I'd be bathing my child or my children, and I've done this for 11 years, and the experience is, and I know a lot of mums will relate to this, just you alone in your apartment, in your house, bathing these kids, and it's so hard. And I remember often thinking, I wonder how many women are in this apartment block or on this street right now doing the same thing, and we're all alone. And wouldn't it be great if we were together? Wouldn't it be great if we lived in more of a community where we did throw all those kids in and feed them dinner together and bath them together, and kind of have that kind of company and reassurance that comes with numbers. And so you can create that a bit yourself. And I did when I had my two little kids were little. I had a beautiful friend. We would feed them together at least 2 nights a week, and we'd have a glass of wine, and we'd feed them spaghetti bolognese, and one might look after the babies while the other bathed the toddlers. And gosh, that was a game changer. But I think if only there was more of that. We need more of that. Yeah. And I think even with women learning to breastfeed for the very first time, and they're thinking, this is so hard, and I feel like I'm failing and I don't know what I'm doing. And I kind of think, well, of course it feels hard because you've never done this before. And I think once upon a time we would have lived in a village. You probably would have watched 12 aunties breastfeed newborns before you did it. And now, often the first baby newborn that anyone is holding is their own. So we kind of, without that village, without all of that community around, we are very much on our own. And so it's hard. It's hard. I could go on forever, but I'm going to cut myself off.
I could let you too. There's so much great stuff I'm getting out of this. There's so many things that you're tapping into that I just didn't even make the link to, which is really awesome.
I just tell you one story.
What's funny, Jen? I was about to say, have you got any stories? You literally took the words out of my mouth.
The moment that this all occurred to me about the village was before I even had children. My husband and I were living in Shanghai, and we did a little traveling, and we went to Kashgar, which is kind of on the border of Tajikistan, Pakistan, and China. And we trekked to this really, really, really remote place. And I remember watching as the older people in this community, and they lived in like yurty tent things, and the older people, their job, they would swaddle these babies up in like massive doonas is what it looked like, and they would string them by rope from the roof of the like tent, and the job of the old people was to stand and swing the babies all day long. And I remember it just really resonated with me. And then as I had my babies, I would often think, where is my elder? We know our babies need to be close to our hearts, and they need to be rocked and held and connected with, but there's only one of us. And so how do we find that balance without the village? So
wow. You had the Hills hoist, just not the elder, right?
Yeah.
Wow. And on the topic of stories, Jen, this is what I'd love to ask. Obviously, we're not going to share names because of confidentiality, but I'm curious of maybe what's been in your career a standout for you in the way of a journey for a mum, or, she arrived at me, this is what she was going through. What's the first one that comes to mind, of just a client that you've worked with? Yeah.
I've got one that happened just in the last week. So I teach a class at hospital, which is all around helping parents know what their older child needs when they're having their second baby. And so it's called becoming a big brother or sister. So it's all about meeting the needs of your older child. And in that class, we cover a lot of things around the practical things that you can do, but around connecting with those kids, setting boundaries and letting big emotions out. Because in our society, we are not so good with big emotions for lots of reasons, which I can't get into today because I would talk for hours. But we find it really hard. And the crazy thing about parenting is that the more you welcome in your kids' big, uncomfortable emotions like sadness and anger and really be okay with it, the less of those emotions you get. And we actually think it would be the opposite. We think that if we welcome it in, we might get more, but it's the opposite. Anyway, I had a dad that did my class. He wrote to me like within a couple of days of doing it, and he just said the most amazing thing happened. I brought my child in to see the mum in hospital who'd had the baby, and it went okay. But when we went to leave, the child went to have this big, massive meltdown, and my instinct was, to just whisk her out or to distract her from that feeling. And he said, I just done your class. I got down and I said, it's really hard having to leave mummy, isn't it? You've missed mummy and now we have to go again and it's really hard. And his child, to his surprise, just went, yeah. And then she just held his hand and off they went.
Wow.
And he just said, it just blew me away that it could just make such a difference. So I loved hearing that, because to have an immediate impact from that knowledge is amazing. But it's my experience too. So I love it when it works for other people.
What an incredible, I'm so glad I asked that question. Oh, you got to just hearing that. It's amazing. Yeah, maybe if you look, we look, because you work with women, say from second trimester on, is it? Or?
Yeah, look, usually, yeah. So sometimes if someone is coming to the hospital, and so in my hospital capacity, it would be people that maybe they get flagged as needing some extra support from the social work team. And so that's how I would meet people. But most of the time I'm meeting people when they're in hospital having a baby,
right.
Whether it's first, second, third or fourth. And then obviously I work privately as well. And then mostly I'm working with parents that are probably right in the thick of it. So they're not having a baby, but they're parenting, a couple of children, and they're really in the thick of dealing with all of those things you've got to do as a parent. And that's when I'd be working with people.
Right. So maybe you can help me. What would be typical questions or things that come up for them? Maybe if we look at, from second trimester, or to the opposite end of the spectrum, being already on the field and trying to work out how to play. What would be the typical things that come up? I guess questions or concerns or fears or worries or doubts?
Oh God, there's so many.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to start with if you've just had your first baby, some of the typical fears and questions are going to be, firstly, am I the only one that's struggling with feeding or with knowing what to do when my baby cries? It's just so hard. And often people are, again, in this village we talk about, they're alone in a hospital room. They don't know until they get into a communal environment like my class that everybody is struggling with that exact same thing. So I think that knowing that it's normal for it to be messy and hard and all of that kind of thing can make a big difference. But the other question I think people might have with a first baby is something like, I've forgotten what I was going to say again.
That's all right. So much to share. I can only imagine.
Anyway, we'll have to move on. It'll come back to me.
All good. Yeah. And maybe, if we look at parents themselves, yep. What are the typical things that come up for them? They're in the thick of it. I can only imagine how they arrive at the conversation with you.
Yeah, it's so varied. It's hard to sort of pick a question, but it would be something like, is it normal or okay for my toddler to start talking like a baby when a newborn gets born? And what should I be doing about it? Do I tell them to stop, or is it okay? And I won't answer that, but little things like that. And they're just so varied. So it's sort of hard to pinpoint, but mostly it's around the fear. I think as parents, we really want to get it right.
Yeah.
We want to do the best job we can raising this child. We want our child to be resilient. And so it's knowing, well, my child's doing this. And if I react like that, is that right or not right? Or, when my child says, I only want mum to get me out of the bath, should we get mum to do it, or should we set a boundary? What's the right thing to do in that moment? I'm trying to turn out this good person. So I think it's that kind of stuff, but it's really hard to be specific.
No, I understand it. It'd be so broad. Maybe I direct it to you specifically. And one thing I love that you shared before when you're talking about, I guess, your identity, you know, when you arrived at that place and say, I don't need, you know, parenting help. I think that was really cool. I honor your authenticity there. That was really awesome. I guess from that, you know, you've mentioned before, each child taught you something different, right? What would be, not individual, but what would be your biggest lesson that parenting has taught you? What has it taught you about you as an individual? You know, if you look at all the boys combined, their efforts.
The hard question. I think, and I touched on it before, but the second baby definitely humbled me, because I'm probably, and I was very open about that, I really thought I was someone, you know, you can read all the books and then you can be a really good mum. And it was as simple as that. And then this second child came along and I was like, wow, it's so much harder than that. And it's not, you know, there's a lot of work we have to do as individuals. And so I guess that second baby sent me on a journey to do my own work. So that's about working out what's triggering me, because that's what's often happening with our kids is they're crying, but our response to it and how we feel about it and what we do about it is so informed by our past and all these other layers. And so in a way, as parents, we think we are growing our kids up, but they are growing us up. So that, you know, that was the journey I came on with the second. I guess with the third, the journey or the joy was getting the hang of it all. I think around the time I had my third baby, I started to feel like, yeah, this is really good. I sort of have the hang of this. And I really enjoyed particularly that third baby, because you really know what you're doing, you know, with a third baby. And there's something very nice about that. Look, my fourth baby, I joke often in my classes, he was sent to Earth to challenge all my theories.
That's Harry, you said, right? Little Harry?
Yeah.
Oh, what a legend.
Little Harry, the hurricane. So Harry's not been an easy baby, and he's 4 now, almost 5. He's got some struggles. So he's got a speech delay, which makes it much harder as well, but he's genuinely like a firecracker of a personality, and it has been hard. It has been really hard, but it's really grown us as parents in a way. And I think, yeah, it's sort of hard to wrap anything perfect or word wise around that, but certainly a fourth child, I think sometimes we are, again, a lot of parenting is about your expectations versus the reality. Our expectations was, we know what we're doing, we're really experienced at this, you know, I'm a circle of security facilitator, what could possibly go wrong? And then again, our children can humble us with like, well, you hadn't met me yet. And
brilliant.
You know, and that in itself. So Harry does a lot of speech therapy and OT, and so through that I've learned so much stuff that I'm also bringing to other parents. So while that's a struggle and you would never wish for your child to have any learning challenges, it's just been so good, but it is hard. Yeah, so that's
really amazing. Now I have a question, and I'm sure you'll have an answer, and maybe it's not related to the things you do, but I'm just curious as well. When it comes to individual relationships with each child, how is that something that you're giving advice to? You know, you've got 4, you've got an individual relationship, you've also got a relationship as a family. I'm just curious of advice on that, your thoughts on that, your insights. Yep. Yeah.
So I think that one of the things I've worked out with my kids is that they do. So we know that children, the best way to, in terms of the attachment research, the best way to connect with children is physically. So often we say to our kids every day, I love you. But children, particularly children sort of under about 6, are not really processing those words in the same way as you or I might with your partner, kind of thing. So it's really important to show children connection, which is how they feel loved physically. So that's our hugs, our high fives, our fist pumps. And I've got lots of strategies for what I teach in terms of connecting with people's kids, but it's also what I do at home. So when I notice my child might be seeking connection, and they might do this through boundary pushing or, just not being themselves or seeming down or whatever, I will go in with a connection strategy. And what I've worked out is that each of my 4 boys resonates with something completely different. So my 6-year-old, often I will just spot him, I will say his name and wink at him, and his little face will just like light up, like, she thinks, because we are the center of our children's universe. And so it's so important, this connection stuff. My eldest child, I sometimes will go in and I just hold him in a hug as if I'm never, ever letting go. And I wait for him to literally kind of wriggle out and say, that's enough. And again, I can see his face has softened at the end of that. And so I guess for me, it's about watching our children's cues and learning from them about what works for them. And anyone that's had more than one baby will know that with your second baby, you go in and you start rocking the baby in the way that you did it for the older child. And then you start to realize, oh, this isn't working for you. You need something else. And that's that individual. So I think it's about tuning into the individual, meeting them where they're at, and then connecting with them in that way that works for them.
That's amazing. I'm so glad I asked that question. I hope they're not listening to this as well. They know the trade secrets.
Well, no, it was funny because I wrote a blog post once about that hug technique, which I love that. And it's really, really powerful for our kids. And I wrote a post about it once, and my oldest son, who's the one I use it on most, he read it and he goes, you do that to me. Yeah, I do. Yeah. He didn't mind.
Love the honesty.
I love that he knew.
You know where that question just come from, Jen? I checked out your website and you have a beautiful image with one of your boys who's in tears. I want to know about that moment. I mean, that was captured. I'm sure it wasn't, here's a lollipop, please cry for the photo. Yeah. I'm sure there was something more to that. I'd love to ask you about that image.
Okay, so that photograph was taken by a very good friend, Tess Donahue, who is a beautiful photographer based in Sydney. And we were doing a quick family shoot because I needed some images for my website, so everybody knew why we were there. And then right at the end of the shoot, I can't remember what happened, but 2 of my older boys did something that upset my 3rd son, Tom, and he's the one crying. And so I did what I do, which is go in and say, you're really sad. And I was giving him a cuddle, and Tess took the photo.
Wow.
So all that happened was, I guess, us being us. Yes. But yeah, he had those big giant tears, and he was just disappointed with something his brothers had done. And I was just listening to him tell me about that and saying, yeah.
Wow. And I want to honor you for that too, because it showed authenticity. I've used that word again, because when I saw the website, that image really caught me. And it caught me because it just showed, here's someone who walks their talk. I just wanted to say that. I think for me, that was one of the standouts too, and why I reached out to you in the message to have a chat. Now, I'm very respectful of your time. The one thing I would love to know, for everybody listening in, I'll have some information below, but I want to know about this course that you offer.
Yes.
You've obviously put all your life's work together to now bring it to a grander audience. I mean, COVID in the world, what better way to do it than obviously virtually? But I want to know a little bit more.
Okay.
Tell me all about it. How did it come about? How did you evolve it?
Yes. So you've heard through the interview, I'm pretty passionate about helping people with that transition from 1 to 2, because I think it's where the rubber hits the road in parenting. So that's the passion, and my personal history drove that. And then I was teaching the class at the Mater, and it was just resonating with people, and the demand for it and the feedback I was getting was just, everybody needs this. And I know from my experience, I needed it. So I just thought, how can I get this to more people? I've created it as it's really quick and easy. It can be done in a few hours. It's affordable, and I've created it as an online course connected to a community where people have access to me, because I never want people to just get info and then be dumped. So I've got a private Facebook group where people can chat with me, where I go live at least once a week. and they can just kind of keep workshopping these ideas. And essentially the course, I've tried to take the key information around creating a secure attachment, and I've applied it specifically to that transition of having a second baby, how it will affect our older child. And it covers the key things that we should do as parents to make our older child feel brought along and connected with through the process, but also just the practical stuff. What should you do in that first meeting when you introduce the baby to the toddler? How do you make sure that goes as well as possible? And also how to repair when we stuff it up and we have that really bad day and we yell at our kids, because what we know is that we don't need perfect parents that never get it wrong. We need to be able to make mistakes and go back into our kids and say, I got that wrong, can we start again? So that's what the course covers, and it also includes access to kind of me in that community. And yeah,
Which
and
essentially you build a village.
yes, that's what I want to do. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really awesome, Jen. I run out of questions. I just sit here. I mean, really, we could talk for hours, but I'm very respectful of the fact that I know you're in your workspace right now, and I know that there's probably someone that's needing support and help. Maybe is there anything else you want to end with? Anything you want to share? Any message that you want to get out to the world before we close off? Anything at all?
Look, I would say that as parents, we're putting a lot of pressure on ourselves. We really want to do this job well. And the evidence says our children need present, not perfect. So if you are showing up and you're holding that baby and you're doing the best you can with your kids and you're paying attention, you're doing an amazing job. And that's all I would say, is just be really kind to yourselves as parents, and absolutely follow me on Instagram and get more tips. But just know that it's a tough gig. And when you're showing up for your kids, you are doing amazing work.
Wow. Jen, I want to thank you again so much for your time. That was really awesome. I learned so much from that as well. And I know listeners did as well. Please send comments. Please go and find this amazing woman and all she's doing on Instagram. I'll have all the information and her website and everything underneath here. I think it's just a wonderful gift to families. And thank you for being that gift for them as well, Jen.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time as well.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.